These are the words of Jesus also from the Gospel of Thomas. If your leaders say to you, "Look, the kingdom of heaven is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, "Look, the kingdom of heaven is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom of heaven is within you and is outside of you and all around you. Do you like the play from the kids? I love that. When they offered that this year, I wanted to be in it. The first time I came across the story of Ferdinand, I didn't like him. I thought he was kind of a pansy. I thought he was kind of weak. It was this guy, you know. But after I had a chance to sort of inhabit that character a couple times, I really came to like him, and I think I'm beginning to understand his backstory, who he is, you know. I tell you what I don't think about Ferdinand. I don't think he's weak. I don't think he's a coward. I don't think that he's afraid of violence, and I don't think that he's afraid of death. What I do think, I kind of think he really does want to kill people. Yeah, I think he does, you know. He was born to kill. He is a Spanish fighting bull, descended from generations of Spanish fighting bulls. He came into this world with the natural weapons and the disposition to rid the world of any human being who walks into his pasture. He was born to kill. He could tear a lion up. So why doesn't he do it? I think, thinking about this character, I think something happened to him. Maybe when he was a very young bull, maybe when his horns were coming in or something, I think he got all excited, and I think he hurt somebody bad. Or maybe he killed something that shouldn't have died and hadn't done anything to him. And I think in that moment, that epiphany, he must have sat back and thought, and he must have grieved. Maybe he cried. And then I think he must have looked inside to what Carl Jung in the Chalice Lighting was calling the shadow, the darkness that we have inside of us. I think that he took a moment and he stopped and he looked inside and he saw the murderous violence that was his birthright and his destiny. And I think he looked at that and he said, "No, never again. This is not the person that I want to be." He rebelled against what had been chosen for him by his human masters. He rebelled against what the world had chosen to him, and he did so from grief. It's historically the best saints have always started out as the worst sinners, and I think it's because it's those people who had the energy and the terrible despair that it takes for a strong transformation. And transformation is what we're talking about this morning. Transformation. I think that Ferdinand, the next thing he must have done was he must have developed a creed. A creed is like your personal constitution. It's your personal 10 Commandments. A creed is how you thoughtfully decide who you want to be in this world. It was a defined code of ethics, and I think that was the beginning of Ferdinand in the play. He discovered flowers, and I think that may have been the beginning of a spiritual path. You have intention, which comes from looking inward and bearing witness to the shadow. You have a creed, which is the beginning of a spiritual path, because it's when you start defining yourself as you aspire to be, not as the world says that you have to be, which is the beginning of integrity. And then comes a spiritual path and a spiritual practice. And that is how transformation is done. I think a religion that isn't helping you to transform yourself is not serving you well, or you're not taking opportunities. You're not taking advantage of it. The goal of a spiritual life should always involve transformation and not comfort. So you make a creed and you want to look at the shadow. You want to look within. What did Ferdinand do? What do we do? To look within is the beginning of a spiritual path. That begins with humility. Humility. What is humility? In the spiritual life, humility has nothing to do with true pride. It has nothing to do with self-hatred. Pride and hatred are the enemies of humility, and consequently they are the enemies of compassion. Humility is the very simple, difficult task of bearing witness to yourself plainly as you really are. It means to look inside and understand yourself with compassion, which means that you're not making yourself any better or any worse. All you want is to understand how you really are and why you do the things you do. This is the beginning of the spiritual path, and it means that you have to look into the shadows. When I first got involved in writing fiction, the best advice I ever got from a writer, once I started to get to know other writers, she said, your demons guard your treasures. Your demons guard your treasures. Your demons are your teachers. It took me a long time to understand that, but that is certainly true. You don't want your demons to be your master. That's the part you're trying to change, but you need to know. I think also that when Ferdinand looked into the shadow and said no to that, he also made a commitment that he would be willing to suffer. He would be willing even to suffer public humiliation if necessary, to make the transformation that he wanted to make according to the creed and the spiritual practice that he had designated for himself from that moment. He was born to kill. He had the weapons and the disposition to kill, and he said no, and he began a spiritual practice to take him in that direction. You have to bear witness to the shadow. If you want to make transformation, that is the beginning. Germany, you think about Germany. I was in the World War II Museum when I was in New Orleans last week. Amazing. Germany bears witness to the shadow. It kept the Auschwitz death camp open for tours. They're not looking for tourist dollars. They want to remember, and they want the world to remember. They have a Holocaust museum, not out of guilt and self-hatred, but because they want the world and their own children to remember. They want them to remember. In Hiroshima, every year, August, next month, the survivors of Hiroshima come out and show their scars to the world, and they bear witness to the shadow so that the world can see their scars and remember and say never again. And so far it's worked. There haven't been any more Hiroshimas so far. Last week at the GA, the big theme of the GA last week, and we'll have a service on this later this month, but the theme at the GA was white supremacy. White supremacy as discovered in our church, not somebody else's, us. And the need to change that. The importance of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was the central theme of the GA Assembly, and discussion of even adding an eighth principle to the 7 principles that we have, to bear witness to the shadow, to remind us never again, to change the leadership, to purge our church, to purge ourselves of any trace of racism, of white supremacy, and to try to come that much closer to what we say we believe. That is how transformation begins. That is why this is a good religion. That's why I love this church. This church also makes a big deal about freedom all the time. Freedom and respect for the individual, as it should. But I tell you something about freedom. I tell you something about people. People are terrified of freedom. That is my experience. That is my shadow. And that is the shadow that I see in our society as a whole. People are terrified of freedom, which is a burden. They want somebody, even a demagogue. You can see this even now. They want somebody to tell them what to believe and who to hate, who to blame, to take the pain and the disruption of your life and find something external to yourself to blame it on. Freedom is a very simple thing. And the problem that we have in our nature is that simple is always unmanageable. A simple spiritual life is unmanageable. What people want is rules. They want taboos. They want somebody to hate. I don't know if the devil exists, but I think that if he didn't, we would need somebody to invent him, because religion has always needed somebody external to ourselves to blame for everything that is wrong in this world. Some way to keep God's hands clean or to keep our own hands clean. We want taboos and we want rules and we want to make reality, which is so unpredictable, manageable. We want to cut a deal with God. We want to believe that if we just accept Jesus as our Savior, we'll go to heaven. We sign the fire insurance, everything is great. What if that's not how it works? What if the purpose is to be Jesus or to be Buddha? How do you do that? That's really hard because you have to change. You can't just believe. You have to do something different with your life. This is a very simple religion, Unitarian Universalism. It's very simple because of its emphasis on freedom and reason and respect for the individual. It takes a lot of faith to be a UU. I think it takes more faith to be a UU than it does other religions or denominations. It's hard because you spend so much of your time in the dark, because you have to spend so much of your time, you have to find your way because nobody's going to tell you. We'll help you, but you got to find your way. So what is a joyful life? What is a joyful life? If you make the effort of transformation, a joyful life can be the fruit of that effort for transformation. A joyful life is not the same as a happy life. A joyful life is not the same as a happy life. Happiness is an emotion. You have it, and then something disturbs your peace, and then you don't have it, and then maybe you have it again. A joyful life is a life in which you are fully engaged in the world. It is a life that is being lived fully. It is a life that is being lived consciously with your sense of spiritual intention. It is a life lived with intention. Somebody asked the Buddha once, "Are you God? Are you a saint?" And Buddha said, "I am awake." And the story goes that, well, what the hell does that mean? You're awake. What is that like? And he said, when I see, I really see. And when I hear, I really hear. And when I feel, I really feel. It is living a life with awareness and compassion and intention. An ordinary life, 1 and 1 equals 2. A joyful life, 1 and 1 equals 3, and sometimes it equals 4. It's greater than the sum of its parts. The purpose of your spiritual life is not to be some abstractly divine being. The purpose of a spiritual life and a joyful life is to be fully human. The purpose of a spiritual practice and a spiritual path, if it serves you well, is to help you find a way to let down some of that armor, to be more open to life, and especially to be more open to some of the tricks that life plays on you, to not be shook by it, to be able to step into it. You have no idea how afraid I am of all of you right now. This is difficult. But the thing is, I think I told you this story once. I have a friend named Dana Cheshire. She was in one of my plays, and I had coffee with her. And I said, well, how do you do it? How do you get on stage every night? Are you scared? Are you ever scared to get out there? She said, oh, yeah, every time. And I said, well, you do. How do you fight it? She said, you don't fight it. you step into it. The fear, the nervousness is your energy. It's what makes you engaged. It's your intention. That, it seems to me, is a great definition of a joyful life. And it's the position that a spiritual life should help you to have towards your own pain and to the dirty tricks that reality plays on you. You don't be afraid of it. You learn through your spiritual practice to let down your armor and to step into it. That is the secret of a joyful life. Part of the fruit of a joyful life is wisdom. What is wisdom? You can have a little old grandma who doesn't know how to read and write, and she can be more wise than a monk or an abbot with his books, because wisdom is the integration. It's the integration of what you know with your experience and your compassion, and it fuels your joyful life. A joyful life is the fruit of a spiritual practice. When you're walking, walk on. That's a Buddhist saying, very simple saying. When you're walking, walk on. If you're walking, really walk. If you're eating, really eat. Whatever you're feeling, really feel it. If it's pain, really feel it. Don't be afraid of it. If you're afraid, like I am now, you just feel it. I have a spiritual practice, and it runs through all of you. You, even the people I don't know, there are people here who are very close to me, and there are people here I don't even know. There's green badges here I've never met before, and my spiritual path runs through all of you, because I find a joyful life through doing something here. Something. Even getting up and speaking, which is hard for me. My spiritual path has come to run straight through you, and if I didn't have you, I wouldn't have a spiritual path. I'd have to start over from the bottom. A spiritual life uses the hard things and the suffering things by facing into them like a cold wind and using your suffering as a lever, as the tools of transformation, because transformation is what we're talking about. A spiritual path is a path of transformation. And if your religious faith is serving you well, it should be helping you to find a way to change yourself in a thoughtful and intentional way. And the thoughtful and intentional transformation leads to a joyful life, which is a life which is engaged. And the joyful life, one of the fruits of the Spirit that you will have, if you get that far, is you'll begin to discover the beauty of ordinary people. The beauty of ordinary people. People in the world who have wounded children. Sometimes when I'm teaching Sunday school, I would see these children who are kind of wounded in some way. And the Sunday school teachers, Ruth and the others, and their parents, they just keep them going. They just get behind them like a jet engine and push those children through this world. They are the iron nails that hold the ship of humanity together. And men, to be a man today can be so confusing. Things are changing so much. Guys lose their job, which for a guy is like losing yourself. And they just try to find some way to keep going and protect their family and hold it together. Everybody around you is a warrior. Everybody around you is having a hard time. Some people hide it better than others. But when you start to experience your own transformative suffering, you'll start to see the beauty of all the heroes who are surrounding you right at this moment. Amen.